طيب، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. بسم الله، الحمد لله، والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept from each and every one of us, Ya Rabb, Ameen, to keep us sincerely committed to truth, to justice, to sincere advocacy, Ya Rabb, Ameen, and to allow us to leave beautiful legacies behind, Ya Rabb, Ameen, Ameen, Ameen. It is not easy to be asked to speak on a day like this, commemorating, I don't even know if that's the right word, subhanAllah, to use, remembering, reflecting on 365 days of genocide, 365 days of children being killed, men and women being killed. 10% of the population, subhanAllah, has been killed, has been wiped out. 10% is not an insignificant number. 50,000 deaths almost, majority of which are, subhanAllah, more than 75, 80% are civilians and people that are in their own homes, in hospitals. And the numbers, again, the infographics are circulating. You can read and feel the significance of this day in again, on your own terms and your own time. But for us today, the topic is on reflecting on what does it mean to be just and justice from an Islamic point of view, especially within the prophetic model, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, of justice. And I want to highlight a few ayat and ahadith and examples from the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to appreciate what that looks like and to compare it and to put it into perspective by drawing that parallelism between what you see in the world that we're living today and how things were during the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's time. So let's begin, inshallah, with a quick recitation. My voice is breaking already, but inshallah, I'll do my best, inshallah, to do a quick recitation just to get into the best state of mind and heart. And then after that, we'll jump straight into the stories, and we'll leave, inshallah, roughly half of the time for Q&A, because I think that is the most important part of a discussion like this. Not just one way, but to have that discussion together, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا أطيعوا الله ورسوله ولا تولوا عنه وأنتم تسمعون. ولا تكونوا كالذين قالوا سمعنا وهم لا يسمعون. إن شر الدواب عند الله الصم البكم الذين لا يعقلون. ولو علم الله فيهم خيرا ولو أسمعهم لتولوا وهم معرضون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا استجيبوا لله وللرسول إذا دعاكم لما يحييكم واعلموا أن الله يحول بين المرء وقلبه وأنه إليه تحشرون. واتقوا فتنة لا تصيبن الذين ظلموا منكم خاصة واعلموا أن الله شديد العقاب. واذكروا إذ أنتم قليل مستضعفون في الأرض تخافون أن يتخطفكم الناس فآواكم وأيدكم بنصره ورزقكم من الطيبات ورزقكم من الطيبات لعلكم تشكرون يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تخونوا الله والرسول وتخونوا أماناتكم وأنتم تعلمون واعلموا أنما أموالكم وأولادكم فتنة وأن الله عنده أجر عظيم. بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. Can everyone hear me if I move from the podium? Can you hear me fine? One of the most beautiful examples of social justice from the life of the Prophet ﷺ is actually the story of Bilal. Bilal was forced to be, subhanAllah, at the bottom of the rock. He was persecuted, he was beaten, he was tortured, water was withheld from him, food was withheld from him, to a point where the short drops were being persecuted because of his belief in Allah. Actually, they're very, very what? They're very, very respected. And the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam to first lift with their hands onto their shoulders. And then Bilal gets on top of the shoulders of Abu Bakr and Umar as they lift him up to the top of the Kaaba to give the adhan for the first time. So here's imagine a black Muslim who was persecuted, and this is in a time, again, same generation. These were slaves that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, again, abolished in many ways the seeds of slavery. And here he's asking the likes of Abu Bakr and Umar to do it, and they do it, full-heartedly with love and with conviction. Not only that, and Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he celebrated when Bilal got married to Abdurrahman ibn Awf's sister, bint Awf, Samra bint Awf. She was actually, subhanAllah, a woman from Quraysh with very light skin, you can imagine, meaning she leaned towards the descriptions in the books of history. They say that she was Asian, more Caucasian in her outlook. And here Bilal, who's a slave that became Muslim and was freed by Abu Bakr, he is marrying this Caucasian-like woman in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and the Nabi ﷺ himself celebrates this marriage, and he says, may Allah put barakah in these kinds of marriages. And he himself encouraged Abdurrahman ibn Awf's family to accept the proposal of Bilal, and this goes to show you, subhanAllah, early on, how the Prophet ﷺ was creating that tension for what? Or that preparation, or creating that, alhamdulillah, potential for equity and equality and social cohesion between members of the community. So those are good examples. And also injustice. And Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam highlighted the importance of fighting injustice socially from an early on point of view. Even the day that Bilal got on top of the Kaaba and gave the adhan, and Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam eventually asked for the keys of the Kaaba to be brought to him. And when the keys of the Kaaba were brought to him after a lot of negotiation by the family of Uthman ibn Talha, who refused at the beginning, saying, I don't want to give it up. It's been in the family of Banu Shaybah for hundreds of years. We don't want to give it up. The Prophet ﷺ sent Uthman and Ali to negotiate. Eventually the keys came. Prophet ﷺ opened the keys of the Kaaba, took the idols out, and then he asked for Uthman ibn Talha to be brought from Banu Shaybah. And he himself ﷺ knelt down
and gave Uthman the key back. And he said, I was not sent to take away your power or to displace your right to these keys. They're your keys, and they're going to stay in your family forever. I've just been sent to purify the house of Allah and to get rid of what? To get rid of idolatry. And he gave the key back to Banu Shaybah. And then he added, no one will ever contest you over this key except somebody who is oppressive or unjust. Until now, imagine all of these years, centuries, people have come and gone, dynasties have come and gone. Nobody has dared take the keys of Banu Shaybah away. And Banu Shaybah still till this day have the keys, subhanAllah, to the Kaaba. So all of these examples that show you, and Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, when he came in, his focus was on maintaining justice, getting rid of inequity, but doing it in a way where he shows, subhanAllah, respect to those that exist, and doing it in a way where he wins them over using heart, using love, using reaching out, using conversation, using communication, not using coercion or force. When he entered Mecca, subhanAllah, Abu Sufyan and one of the others from the leaders of Mecca, they were actually at the edge of a hill, and they had their swords ready. They were deliberating, should we fight? Or should we, let's see what happens, what unfolds? Because they'd already accepted Islam, ideologically it made sense. But there's still a bit of an ego that you have to overcome to submit as the previous owner or the previous master or the previous mayor of the town, to submit to the coming of the Prophet ﷺ. It was a difficult decision to make. So Abu Sufyan, he's by the hill, he has his sword, and he's about to draw it out. He's about to draw it out. And then he hears the announcement of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Nobody enters the house of Abu Sufyan except that they're safe. Nobody enters the house of Abu Sufyan except that they're safe. Now that was done strategically by the Prophet ﷺ to do what? To show respect to Abu Sufyan, to show respect to who he is and what he stands for in the community. And by doing that, Abu Sufyan actually, subhanAllah, opened his heart to Islam. And that was one of the early reasons why he becomes now fully committed to Islam, not just as an ideology, but now as the ruling, subhanAllah, ideology that will rule the community and rule Mecca. So Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was strategic in his commitment to justice, and he was willing to forgive and go the extra mile and give people chance after chance after chance in order what? In order to get their heart to see the beauty and the grace of Islam. And one of the words that Abu Sufyan asked Umar ibn Khattab before he became Muslim, he's like, okay, this Islam of yours, does it call people to respecting those that have invested and committed time and experience into the community? And Umar Khattab says, absolutely. Meaning Abu Sufyan's concern is like, look, I'm a leader. Am I going to be respected? Is my experience going to be of use to you? Or are you going to come in? Sometimes when people come in, they just do a full cleanup. Thank you so much. You can go home. We don't care about you. We're doing a full sweep. Nobody's going to stay. Everybody's gone. A complete sweep. Now, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was not like that. He said, you know what? You have something to offer. We respect your experience. We respect the contributions that you've done. And if you're willing to accept Islam, if you're willing to really give it even a chance, just commit even outwardly and work on your heart, we're willing to work with that. And the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, subhanAllah, he worked with many people like Ikrimah and others. The way that they became Muslim is incredible. Now when it comes to, subhanAllah, justice in the court, justice in the society, and Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, as you know, he had a policing force in Medina. And he built that policing force early on. And he had a court system that was built on in Medina. And he was in many ways ruling between the people of Medina. And in many times, subhanAllah, if you look at the early constitution of Medina, that's an example of a document that is celebrated till this day as one of the earliest constitutions that highlight the importance again of justice, equality to all, respect to all. Jews were allowed to rule, subhanAllah, or judge based on their own criteria from the Torah, and the Muslims were allowed to rule or judge based on the criteria of the Quran. And any issues that arose between Muslims and Jews, it would be brought back to a Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So I want to give you a few examples of these things. We have Ibn Abi Jardad, and he comes to a Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and he says, again, this is somebody who is Jewish, he's coming to a Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he says, Ya Rasulullah, this Muslim of yours, he actually took some of my money. He took 4 dirhams from my money, and he's not giving it back. So what did the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam do? He said to the Muslim man, أعطيه حقه. Give him the right that he deserves. And the man is like, Ya Rasulullah, I can't. He iterated again. Give him the right that he deserves. Ya Rasulullah, but I can't. And he iterated it a 3rd time. Give him the right that he deserves. And now when it comes he repeats it 3 times, this Muslim individual went to the market, subhanAllah, he sold like whatever left of his possessions to be able to pay this debt back. He paid it right away, and then the Nabi ﷺ sent someone from the community to help him with the finances that he needs to be able to recover. But the Nabi ﷺ, subhanAllah, he would not give preference to a Muslim over somebody else from another faith. Justice was maintained regardless of where you come from, regardless of the faith that you follow. And the Nabi ﷺ, subhanAllah, in that case, he's dealing with someone, he's a Jewish member of the community, but he actually comes from Banu Qaynuqa. And Banu Qaynuqa have just caused, subhanAllah, disturbance to a Nabi ﷺ. They're on the verge of causing treason to a Nabi ﷺ, but he did not let these general politics affect the way that an individual was treated. Very important. He didn't let the general politics and the toxicity that was going on actually affect the way that individuals are treated based on justice and based on, again, social equity. In addition to that, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam once was brought a Jewish man and a Muslim man who were fighting. Imagine they're fighting, and when they're fighting, they come to a Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam and they present their case. What's the issue? The Muslim man says, look, we got into a fight over some money, again, but what really, really upset me was that he's saying to me that Moses is much better than your prophet. And I was telling him, no, Muhammad is much better than Musa alayhi salam. And so we ended up getting into a scuffle. So Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he actually did what? He said, do not engage in this kind of behavior, and do not ever لا تفضلوا بين الأنبياء. Yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives certain criteria to different prophets and messengers, but don't use that as a reason to cause what? As a reason to say, oh, mine is better than yours, and to create that tension or to create that fitna. He gave a very, very clear command against this kind of comparison or this kind of narrative or dynamic or rhetoric that would actually lead to social tension or social, subhanAllah, fitna. And imagine nowadays all the stuff that you read on YouTube videos and on, subhanAllah, and social media. You have Muslims and Muslim social justice warriors, and then you have the Zionist lobby and things going on. A lot of the conversation or the nature of the conversation, subhanAllah, is in many, many ways, yes, it's fueled by emotion, but it's something that if you ask yourself, would the Prophet ﷺ actually endorse this kind of rhetoric? Would he actually be supportive of this kind of rhetoric? The answer in many cases will be no. Doesn't mean we don't respond. We should actually have committed, subhanAllah, panels dedicated to responding and making sure that Islam is not demonized, Islam is not, subhanAllah, misrepresented, but the way that it's done. We can never compromise, subhanAllah, the integrity of Islam in the process of trying to represent it or trying to defend it. Another one, subhanAllah, is Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was actually approached again in Medina, and this is between one of the companions, Ash'ath ibn Qais. Many of you have read the biography of Ash'ath. Ash'ath ibn Qais had, subhanAllah, a piece of land, and he sold it to a Jewish member of the community. And it's interesting because some of these early documents, early trade agreements or sales agreements actually survived in part, or representations of them survived in part in the early manuscripts that are collected, subhanAllah, and found later on in Sana'a. So this is one of the earliest, subhanAllah, documents that we have. And Ash'ath ibn Qais, he says to Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ya Rasulullah, I have this land, I sold it, but this individual did not actually, subhanAllah, give me my money back. Or he did not give me the full money that is owed to me. And Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked him, do you have evidence? Do you have proof? Do you have witnesses? When he did the sale, was it written down? When he did the sale, was an agreement made? When he did the sale, were these witnesses? So he comes back and he says, look, yes, we agreed, the witnesses were there for the early exchange, but nobody had, again, witnessed the later on discussions that we had. So Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he told them, okay, well, in that case, if you don't have evidence, like I can't just rule for you because you're Muslim. I simply cannot. You need to bring evidence forward. And so when he said, I don't have any evidence other than what happened, he said, okay, well, bring the Jewish man forward. And the Jewish man, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam told him, just take an oath on the Torah. Take an oath on the Torah that this really did not happen, that you did not take any of the money, or that whatever was supposed to be paid was paid. The Jewish man took an oath, and Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, that's it. End of discussion, unless you can bring any evidence forward. Now this man is like, Ya Rasulullah, but these individuals, he's about to say these individuals, that rhetoric of generalization. Oh, Jews are like this, or Muslims are like that. And Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says, stop, do not speak like that. Bring evidence forward or remain silent. SubhanAllah, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he really shut that language down, the language of demonization of entire groups, the language of, SubhanAllah, broadening the scope to affect each and everyone and to label each and everyone. And this is actually a Quranic sentiment, right? Allah says in the Quran, وَمِنْ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ مَنْ إِنْ تَأْمَنْهُ بِقِنْطَارٍ يُؤَدِّهِ إِلَيْكَ وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ إِنْ تَأْمَنْهُ بِدِينَارٍ لَا يُؤَدِّهِ إِلَيْكَ إِلَّا مَا دُمْتَ عَلَيْهِ قَائِمًا. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَيْسُوا سَوَاء. لَيْسُوا سَوَاء. They're not all to be treated the same. They're not all to be categorized the same. There are some of them that if you give them a small trust, even if it's the smallest, they'll give it back. And if you give them the largest trust, they'll give it back, meaning that they're trustworthy, they're honest. And others, if you give them something small, they will not give it back, except if you insist and insist and insist and insist. Because subhanAllah, it's not about the category, it's about making sure that you are committing to the justice of each and every individual. And this is actually, subhanAllah, mentioned even in large, Surah An-Nisa, there's the big, from 103, ayah 103 onward, and then right after that, you have in the third page, after those ayat, you have the large ayah which says, O you who believe, remain in commitment to justice, even if it's against yourselves, even if it's against your parents, even if it's against the rich or the poor, even if it's against your kin. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is more worthy of your justice, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is better equipped to take care of them than you are. Because sometimes what we do is we say, oh, these people are so poor that, I can't really advocate on their behalf because there's no point. I'm not going to get anywhere. Or these people are so rich, I'm intimidated to stand in front of them and call out their actions because I'm going to get in trouble. And subhanAllah, all of these ayat, they're actually talking about the story of the stolen shield. I've given that talk multiple times before. Some of you are familiar with it, but for those of you who are not, in brief, what happened? There's a Muslim guy, he stole the shield from another Muslim guy. And he blamed the Jewish man for the theft. So Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he sent the investigators, and the shield was actually found in the house of the Jewish man, but because it was planted by one of the guys who's blamed for this action. And if Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam had ruled based on the evidence that he saw, he would have basically, subhanAllah, put to jail that Jewish man, Zayd. But it was actually Bashir, a Muslim who stole the shield. And the ayats in the Quran, read them, 103, يَا أَيُّهَا إِنَّا أَنزَلْنَا إِلَيْكَ الْكِتَابَ بِالْحَقِّ لِتَحْكُمَ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ بِمَا أَرَاكَ اللَّهُ وَلَا تَكُنْ لِلْخَائِنِينَ خَصِيمًا وَاسْتَغْفِرِ اللَّهَ إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ غَفُورًا رَحِيمًا وَلَا تُجَادِلْ عَنِ الَّذِينَ يَخْتَانُونَ أَنفُسَهُمْ. Till the end of the ayat, Allah gives a clear command to the Prophet ﷺ, rule based on what Allah has allowed you to see, not based on what people presented to you in false evidence. And do not ever stand in advocacy against any or for anybody who's lied, who's been treacherous, who's tried to twist the information, who's tried to twist the facts to suit their project, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most wise and the most seeing. And what's interesting, subhanAllah, is in Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam actually, he ordered for that Jewish man to be set free, and he ordered for compensation to be paid for him, for the damage that was caused. Right? So this is a Jewish man. By the way, if you look at the biography or the biographical dictionaries, Zayd, where does he come from? He comes from Banu Nadir. Banu Nadir, they have done so much harm to the Prophet ﷺ. They have killed many of his community members. They've done several treacherous acts, right? Several treacherous acts. Yet when it comes to dealing with one of them, based on this situation, he went, subhanAllah, based on the Quranic command, to give justice, even if it's against yourself, against your parent, against this, against that, because that is more important in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, why do I say this? I say this because of two things. And we have to be very careful with those two things. We have an unequivocal uncompromising, uncompromising commitment to our brothers and sisters in Palestine. Unequivocal, right? Unequivocal. Like in the Masjid, subhanAllah, Isna, we have refused to receive politicians, publicly or privately, after what's happened, unless there is a direct commitment to Palestine on some level. And nobody's been, getting ready or showing any interest to, subhanAllah, show any commitment. And the reason for that is because, again, the Muslims are, politically, we should be more united. We should do a lot more to ensure that advocacy is done properly. There's a lot more money and power invested in other narratives, and there's a lot less power and money invested by the Muslim community in our narratives. And that's a reality. It's getting better in some circles, but still, given numbers and the resources the Muslims have, like our voices should be a lot more loud and our voices should be a lot more clear. But also in the process of advocating, is it a genocide? Absolutely. Is this displacement? Absolutely. Has this been going on since 1948 and even before? Yes, absolutely. Are the original documents, subhanAllah, illegal? Absolutely. Is this a form of ethnic cleansing? No doubt, absolutely. Can we say all of these things? Absolutely, unequivocally. Can we say all of that while also maintaining the respect to the principles of Islam, of affirming all of human life and affirming the value of every human life? Absolutely. And can we do that also with the possibility of extending and reaching some sort of agreement one day, inshallah, where the lives of all are respected under a rule that is based on, again, acceptable premises within the Quran and the Sunnah? Yes. But the reparation has to be done along the way, and the conversations that need to be had, are we on the same page? Are other lobbyist groups and other Zionist entities, or at least representations of those Zionists, are they ready to have that conversation? Allahu A'lam, but it seems very, very far. So we have to, in our advocacy for Palestine and advocacy for any Muslim in the world, whether it's Chechnya or Kashmir or the Uyghur brothers and sisters, we have to remain united. We have to mobilize. We have to stay connected. We have to represent. We have to use our social media and platforms to really bring attention to the process. But we cannot let our emotions blind us. We cannot let our emotions trigger us and lead us to actually, subhanAllah, contributing to the narrative and arming those who wish to use the periphery amongst us to represent the rest of us and all of us. And that requires a commitment, subhanAllah, from each and every one of us to use our resources, to use our voices strategically, wisely, but to remain committed to that, subhanAllah, original premise of the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, where he told the companions, support your brother or your sister, whether they're oppressed or whether they're oppressing. They said, Ya Rasulullah, I understand how to support my brother. If he's oppressed, I help. But how do I support my brother if he's oppressing? If he's the one oppressing? And Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he said what? He said, support your brother if he's oppressing by helping to bring an end to that oppression. Because if they're oppressing in this dunya, they're going to face the consequences of that in the akhirah. So if you care for them and you love them, help them end that oppression, because that is you helping your brother. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from those who are committed to justice, Ya Rabb, Ameen. Whether we're the ones in the wrong, whether someone else is in the wrong, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give support to the people of Palestine, to the children of Palestine. May Allah allow us to see a free, self-determining Palestine, autonomous Palestine. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to do it in the most constructive of ways, in the most beautiful of ways, and in the way that would make the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam proud. Allahumma rudd alayna Filistina raddan jamilan karima ya Rabb, wa rudd alayna al-Masjid al-Aqsa raddan kariman jamila, warzuqna salatan fi qabl al-mamat ya Rabb. Ameen. Questions? We'll take questions, inshallah. Thoughts, reflections, questions? Yes, sir. Yeah. I think a lot of people, subhanAllah, that are advocating today, they're not spiritually rejuvenated well enough to be able to represent Islam beautifully. So being motivated by anger is it's anger is a great motivator. But Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was not driven by anger. He was not driven by desire for revenge. He was driven by the desire to save the person from their own ignorance and to save the person from their own limitations and from their own injustices, and to actually see that person in Jannah or guided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this dunya. That was his motivation. He was motivated by love. So what happens is we have such weird political orientations in this part of the world. Because when you go through the Western educational system, like University of Toronto, Mississauga, University of Toronto, St. George, and I've been in the system for like 20 years now. I've been studying, I don't even know how many degrees I've finished now with the PhD, just comprehensive exams 2 months away. So I know what it's like. So you go through this system and you're remolded, you're reconfigured, especially if you do subhanAllah liberal arts. If you're doing engineering, you're pretty safe for the most part, right? But if you're doing anthro or sociology or psych or social work, there's a lot of ideology, and it's the most subtle of forms that seeps into some of those now predispositions and challenges some of those assumptions. And that's why we got to go back, and I always encourage advocates to orient yourself in the Islamic tradition. Orient your advocacy in the Islamic tradition. So the genealogy of your ideas are Islamic, not foreign to Islam. Imagine when when you do a DNA test, like, oh, this is okay, I can see where this comes from. When you do a DNA test of your ideas actually have Islamic principles and foundations. They're not foreign that come and then superimpose themselves into Islam, and then you mold Islam where it's where it's suitable, and then you don't when it's not suitable. That's not. And ادخلوا في السلم كافة. I would say, again, advocacy has to be principled based on the prophetic tradition, based on love for the other, based on care for the other. And based on also, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam loved and he cared, but when it came to justice, like he was, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, if Fatima, my daughter, were to steal, I would be the first to implement the hadd on her. So there's no preferential treatment. And Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam knew when to put the shield and the armor on. And subhanAllah, when it was that time, when Uhud, when they said, Ya Rasulullah, we change our mind, please take the armor off, we'll wait here. He's like, no, once a prophet puts an armor on, once a decision is made, you don't go back on that decision. So the idea of principled advocacy, knowing when to, cross those specific boundaries of rahmah and lean into more of the assertive and firm commitments to uncompromising justice in that sense, that's an area where we need to really go back to the sunnah of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and better study his example for inspiration. Wallahu a'lam. Yeah. So it's a good question. The people on the ground who are being genocided, the people who are being genocided, they don't stop. They don't stop resisting. So we don't stop protesting. Like they don't take time to, oh, I need to take a mental health leave of absence for like a month, 2 months. Take some time to recover. Yeah, no problem. Balance your life, no problem. But this idea of like, khalas, I'm checked out. There's no point in this. They don't have that luxury, right? So we don't have that luxury. If the only thing that comes out of this, is people of Palestine look at our social media feeds, they look at our advocacy and they say, our Muslim brothers in Canada have not forgotten us, that's enough. If every single Palestinian is genocided, but we fail, right? We don't we don't give up, we don't give up, we refuse to stop, then that in itself, wallahi, in the long term, will speak volumes, because what does that mean? It means that the Muslim Ummah still maintains what? Maintains at least, and the Nabi said, if there's something wrong, resist, through what? Through your hand. If you can't, then resist through your tongue. If you can't, then resist through your heart. So if we can't resist physically because of whatever reason, then at least tongue, constant posts, constant retweets, amplifying the voices that already bring attention to it, and in our hearts, really hating, disliking it, making dua, protesting, then that is sufficient. But we don't give up. We don't give up. And I can give you lots of ahadith and ayat about the idea of, and the concept of not giving up. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us, فَمَا وَهَنُوا لِمَا أَصَابَهُمْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَمَا ضَعِفُوا مَا اسْتَكَانُوا. They did not waver in the commitment to Allah. They did not weaken. They did not lose their drive. Even though they've seen the worst of the worst, victory comes at the most unexpected of ways. Think about the people that were with Musa, right? As they're turning to the sea, they're about to be, that's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends the splitting of the sea. You never know when Allah's help is going to come. You never know under which conditions Allah's help is going to come. But what you are in control of is your own commitment to the advocacy and not giving up. I would say don't give up. Whatever you're doing, do that and 10 times more. Because you're not responsible for the outcome, but you are responsible for the effort. You're responsible for the effort. And also, as you do that, you should go back again, go back to the foundations and look at what's missing. Look what Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam actually told us. And what did he say in these circumstances? He said, there will come a time, and the hadith is authentic, there will come a time in which you are going to be like a banquet dinner, eaten from every corner possible, attacked from every corner possible, literally savagely attacked from every corner possible. And this will be a time in which you are humiliated in people's eyes, and you're humiliated in your own eyes. So look, you're a banquet, you're a meal at the table, you have very low self-image, and your image or your reputation among others is horrible. Now all these things are literally what we're living in today. So they said, Ya Rasulullah, awa min qillah, awa nahnu qalilun ya Rasulullah fi dhaka zaman. Is it because we're little? We're a small population, Ya Rasulullah, at that time? He said, no. La bal antum kathir. No, quite the opposite. You're many. You're large in number. So Ya Rasulullah, why? How did it get to that level? He said, it got to that level because you did two things. You became attached to the dunya, the material of the world, and you began to fear death. You began to fear death. Attached to the material, I mean, look at the Muslims. Look at the opulence. Do I need to give further descriptions? Someone comes to propose to, even within our community, someone comes to propose to your daughter, you don't ask about their Islamic education or how well they practice. First question, where did you study? Where do you work? How much money do you make? So let's be real. We are a very materialistic community. Very materialistic community. Right? Look at the way that we live, mashallah. I do a lot of visits to people's homes, and I know where the community is at. We're dealing with thousands of people on a daily basis. There's a lot of money in the Muslim community, but where's that money going? Locally, and look at abroad. We have trillionaires in the Muslim community that can't even document their wealth on paper because it would break scales. But where's that money going to? Right? We're buying Cristiano Ronaldo. We're sponsoring this and sponsoring that. We're bringing golf. We're building ski resorts in the desert. We're building, mashallah, tabarakallah, by the way, there's nothing wrong with that if it's in balance. But you can't be doing that while at the same time, the agony, the pain, the cry of our Muslim brothers and sisters. Let's just be frank. The love of dunya, we have it, no doubt. And then fear of death. Do we look forward to the day that we meet Allah? What does it mean to not fear death? What does it mean to not fear death? It means to have what? Have no regrets. You're living every day like it could be your last. Right? You're living every day like it could be your last. You're ready to meet Allah today. But am I ready to meet Allah today? Are you ready to meet Allah today? So Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam summarized that these are the two things. Once you begin to get into that zone, and then who are you? Are you really Muslim anymore? What makes you different? Even you're praying, you're making dua, you're doing this and all of these things. But are you truly Muslim anymore? Or has Islam become just a cultural dress and attire that we now wear whenever convenient, and we take off whenever inconvenient. It's become a label. It's become a statement. Well, I'm culturally Muslim, but I'm an atheist, or I'm practicing, or I'm confused. I'm in between. La ilaha awla'i wa la ilaha awla'. Right? And then subhanAllah, and Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said in a hadith that's also authentic, there will come a time in which, and he describes very similar conditions, and he says, to the point where the weakest amongst you will make dua, but Allah will not answer them. Allah will not answer the dua. So there are times actually where Allah shuts the door to dua, because when you turn to Allah for dua, guys, you have to have exhausted your resources. And you're at a point of like, I can't do anything, Allah, step in and help. You understand? So like imagine, I'll give you the example of Hajar. Hajar, she's by herself in the desert, left. So what does she do first? She runs Safa, Marwa 7 times. She can't breathe anymore. Now she's done her baby. She can't even carry the baby anymore. She's fully exhausted. She's on the ground. Ya Allah, I can't anymore. I've done the best that I can. I've yelled, I've cried, I've tried to get attention, I've looked, I've searched, I can't do anything anymore. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends His help. And what's His help? Ismail, radiallahu anh, he's, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he's a prophet, right? So he scratches the ground, Zamzam is born. So Allah is telling you, it's not even your efforts. Your efforts show that you're serious, you're sincere. But then after that, it wasn't even your efforts. It was a scratch of a baby that made Zamzam born. You see the wisdom. But you can't be sitting like in 2024, Muslims are like, what? We make 1/3 of the population globally. We have, subhanAllah, 1/3 of the world's resources, right? And sometimes half of the world's resources in other areas. Wealth is there, population is there, numbers are there, advocacy is there. Like if you think about our reach, maybe 20, 30 years it wasn't the same, but now we have lawyers, we have educators, we have representatives who speak like multiple languages, we speak French, we speak English, we can advocate, we can represent. What I'm sorry, but guys, like it's like, when a student comes and asks the professor for help, like, okay, I'll help you, but show effort. Like you haven't read the material, you haven't attempted to like study, and you're coming and asking for help. What's the professor gonna do? Like, shame on you, right? Shame on you. So when you're making constant dua and the dua is not being answered, that in itself is a sign that Allah is telling you to do what? Look within. Fix your own conditions. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. Allah will not change the conditions within you until you change the conditions, or Allah will not change the conditions around you, between you as humans, until you change the conditions within yourself as individuals. Does that make sense? Does that mean we stop giving dua? We stop making dua? No, because it's still an act of what? An act of worship. So we still do dua. Does that mean we undermine the power of dua? No, we don't. We still continue doing dua. We still cry at night for them. We still post. We still do all of these things. We have to go back to the root causes and ask ourselves, like from a grassroots point of view, where have we as Muslims failed? And the question to that, I'm sure you'll be able to better answer, subhanAllah, than I can in the brief time that we have. But other questions? Hmm. So give me an example. Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. I hear you, and I understand, subhanAllah, what you're getting at. Look, we have to collaborate. We have to collaborate, but also make our principles known. And we can't be double-faced. And we can't have double speak. These are principles that we're very clear on. Does that make sense? And Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he collaborated with the Jews of Medina. He collaborated with the Christians of Medina. He collaborated even with Arab tribes that were not Muslim at the time. And there's the hulf, the agreement that he signed before Islam, that he said, if I were to be called to this even in Islam, I would do the same. And that was what? That was on maintaining and implementing social justice for all. Social justice for all. So if I'm able to collaborate with any other organization, but I'm able to explicitly make it clear that these are my premises, this is what I'm coming to the table with, and my collaboration with you on this is based on our co-shared agreement to or focus on this specific goal, but it doesn't mean that I affirm your entire existence and being, that's fine. That collaboration is fine. But if that collaboration comes at the expense of me having to compromise my principles, then it's not fine. Do you see where the line is? Does that make sense? So LGBTQ community coming and saying, we're going to work with you guys on a Palestinian rally or support movement. Mashi. But do you know that my position as a Muslim for the LGBT community will never change? If you're okay with that, khalas, no problem. You're a human being and you're coming as a human being, I respect it. But if you're expecting this encounter to win you brownie points when it comes to X, Y, Z, it's just never going to happen. Does that make sense? Well, like what do you have? I mean, you cannot say the opposite. And you cannot give impression of the opposite, because that would be clearly what? That would be clearly betraying your principle. When do you say it? How do you say it? That's where wisdom comes in. Then do you say it? That's where wisdom comes in. But you cannot compromise these principles, right? In the process. Like social justice, no problem. Every human being has social justice in whatever society they're living in today. We affirm that right to social justice. But the orientation itself or the practice itself, I mean, Islam is very clear. The Quran is very clear. Does that make sense? And everybody else, it's the same thing with like the Jewish community or the Christian community. When the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam had conversations with the Jewish community or the Christian community, he welcomed them in the masjid. He made them come and stay in the masjid. He received them in the masjid. He had dinners with them, food with them. He respected them. Does that mean he affirmed their belief in Jesus? No. Do you see the border? The line has to be clearly drawn. Yeah, and then we'll follow up. Yeah. No, indigenous solidarity, I 100% welcome, and I think we should support unequivocally. And if we're not, then shame on us, because that's double speech. That's double speak. That's commitment when it's for you, but when it's inconvenient, that's injustice from an Islamic point of view. Again, commitment to justice is a part of da'wah. It's a part of da'wah, and it doesn't matter what the person believes in. It doesn't matter what they don't believe in. If there's a right that is theirs, we should be the ones to what? To champion it, regardless of whether they believe in Islam or not. That's a principle in Islam. Now, doing that actually allows them to see the beauty of Islam and increases the chance of them seeing Islam positively. That's not our intention, but it's a byproduct of being committed uncompromisingly to that justice. Does that make sense? You know, there's this, subhanAllah, just a few days ago, I had a new Muslim dinner at the Masjid, Islam, and one of the sisters that was there, she is indigenous, and she actually works at an indigenous community center where she's helping hundreds, thousands of indigenous communities. And the stories that she shared, subhanAllah, of just the response of the indigenous community to what's happening in Palestine is overwhelming. Like these are many of, subhanAllah, potential believers and sympathizers, and it's a shame that we're not doing enough to reach out. It's a shame that we're not doing enough to reach out. Brother David Alexanderson became Muslim 10 years ago. He's indigenous. Through his efforts alone, more than 1,000 people became Muslim over the last couple of years. How many of us, subhanAllah, I'm not saying it's that's the point of these conversations, but I'm saying if that many people from the indigenous community are interested in actually becoming Muslim, that shows you that the desire and the potential for engagement and communication and work is incredible with these individuals. Sister, and then sister, inshallah. Yeah. Just don't be dishonest. Don't be dishonest. You can be silent if it's not beneficial, if it's going to bring nothing, but just don't be dishonest. And remember that the greatest type of jihad is a just word in the face of power, unjust power. That's a form of jihad. So we need to have that confidence and trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it comes with, like, you weigh it out. Is it worth the statement? And am I going to be, supported by the community? And that's where, subhanAllah, the unity is key. The unity is key. Unfortunately, when one of us falls as Muslims, we don't step in to like assist and to help as quickly as we should. We don't have each other's backs as much as we should. But if we did, more of us would have the confidence. Like if a professor today, UFT, who's Muslim, gets in trouble for saying something, I bet you, subhanAllah, in a halal way, right? I'm almost certain that the first question that we're going to ask before supporting is, are they actually Muslim, or where do they stand? She doesn't, wear the hijab properly. He doesn't do this. Well, he's not from Maida. Is he this? Is he that? What kind of aqidah does he have? What kind of, all of these filtering questions that we go through to position them first before we wonder and before we try to answer the question, do they deserve my support or not? And that's a problem. That's a problem in itself. And that goes back to the question of unity. If we actually were to work on that unification and social cohesion in the community, then more of us would be emboldened to stand up and to say what is just and true. Because I know I got my community, the community's got my back, and I got my community's back. But we're not there yet. We're almost there, inshallah, but we're not there yet. Tafadali, sister. Um, look, it's difficult at this time. There's no doubt. A lot of interfaith work is halted across Ontario, across the GTA, across North America, but it needs to resume, and especially with those who are looking to be honest. Like if someone, a lot of Jewish rabbis, they're not anti-Palestine. They're willing to have conversations. A lot of the Jewish community is willing to have conversations. And if we don't center those voices and engage with those voices, what happens is they end up being like losing on both ends. They're getting the heat from the Muslim community because the Muslim community is not differentiating, and they're getting the heat from their own community because their own community is like, you're sellouts. So we have to be, again, we have to have like a communal plan. This is like on a broader, bigger level picture. Organizations like the NCCM, the Canadian Council of Imams, like larger Muslim organizations, the Fiqh Council of North America, these efforts need to be led from a top-down point of view. And if you can imagine 100 imams coming together, 100 senior Muslim women in the community coming together with 100 members of the Christian community, the Jewish community, a statement for Palestine, a history documentary that we watch together to understand what's going on in Palestine, a session where we read, subhanAllah, some of these earlier documents, or even like a Quranic approach to what does it mean, like the Quranic image of the Holy Land, and what does it mean for land to be holy? What does it mean for the concept of khilafah? What does it mean to be an ambassador to that land? Like, so much can be done, but it just requires, subhanAllah, the advocacy. And I would say you as students in this specific university, the best thing that you can do is constantly like unite under one or two major organizations in the student body, so they can represent and work with other organizations outside of the student body to make sure that your voices are united and clear. Because once you have that unity and clarity on where you stand, it becomes easier then to represent and to engage. But it's an internal conversation that needs to be done first. Wallahu alam. Okay? Thoughts, questions, concerns? Feel free, guys. We're very open to also concerns and negative feedback also. Very happy to receive that. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I would say get involved with the NCCM and volunteer with the NCCM and join some of the advocacy meetings and public relations meetings. Those will help give more insight into what can be done on a day-to-day basis beyond advocacy in protest realm, inshallah. No, I don't think that shouldn't be the case. If it's right and there's no halal in it and there's no haram in it, then get involved. But don't undermine that conversation with or dinner with an indigenous group because there's khair in that too. So prioritize, send your biggest effort to the biggest impact, but also dedicate and allocate enough effort for the small things because that's where relationship building happens. Tamam? And don't say I'm not going to be part of it because there's no Muslim logo on it. If it's halal, do it, regardless of who's leading that flag, who's championing that cause. Yeah. Good. So there's a clean article on principled advocacy. I would read that. There's a nice interview with Sheikh Tawfiq Chowdhury on the topic. Engage with that. This is one that was also done by Sheikh Omar Suleiman. Engage with that. And I would just read the life of the Prophet ﷺ and the series because wallahi, if you study the life of the Prophet ﷺ from Mecca to Medina, like in a close reading, close analysis, it'll give you a lot of guidance as to how to navigate all of these issues because he's doing this on a day-to-day basis. So read the Shama'il al-Muhammadiyya, what we're going to start with, right? Read, nice plug for what's to come. Read the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ from beginning to end. And there's a lot of commentary on the seerah now that it's easy to read from beginning to end and well. Okay? وإياكم. Yeah. Yeah. So we disengage. Yeah. Yeah. So I think we need to engage on our terms, and hopefully with enough time. I think it's going to take 15 years for Muslims to be at the forefront. But while we are given what we have, given the limitations of today, I would say engage with whatever is already on the ground, and then build for the next generation those who, inshallah, will take the lead in this regard. Okay. طيب, any last questions? Last one from sisters, brothers have asked many sisters. Okay, I think we've had enough time. Inshallah, we'll just close out with a dua. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين اللهم انصر المستضعفين في فلسطين اللهم انصرهم نصرا عاجلا يا كريم اللهم اشف مريضهم وداوي جريحهم وتقبل شهيدهم يا رب العالمين اللهم وحد صفوفنا على كلمتي الحق والدين اللهم انصرهم على عدوهم يا رب العالمين اللهم رد إلينا فلسطين ردا جميلا كريما ورد إلينا المسجد الأقصى ردا كريما جميلا وارزقنا صلاة فيه قبل الممات يا رب العالمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد في الأولين وصل على سيدنا محمد في الآخرين وصل على سيدنا محمد في الملأ الأعلى إلى يوم الدين